As the Emperor's Force lightning consumed him, Anakin Skywalker clung to life. He had just saved his son, Luke Skywalker, from the hands of Emperor Palpatine, throwing the Sith Lord into the reactor shaft. But the cost was immense. His mechanical body was failing, his respirator wheezing its final breaths. Luke's hands trembled over the controls of the mask, poised to remove it, as his father had asked. But something held him back. "No," Luke whispered, his resolve hardening. "You'll die if I take this off." Luke cradled his father's heavy form, his voice thick with sorrow. "I won't leave you. I've got to save you." But as Anakin felt his end approaching, something shifted within him. He refused to let death take him, not yet. His son needed him. The galaxy probably still needed him. With sheer willpower, he clung to the Force, reaching deep into the light that had been buried for decades. And the Force answered. As the second Death Star trembled with explosions, Luke dragged Anakin to an escape shuttle. Anakin, weak but alive, collapsed into the co-pilot seat as the shuttle fled into the void of space. Darth Vader was dead. Anakin Skywalker lived. Word of the Emperor's death spread like wildfire across the galaxy. But when the Rebel Alliance discovered that Anakin Skywalker, formerly Darth Vader, had survived, the reaction was split. To Luke, it was a miracle. To Leia, it was a nightmare. "You want me to forgive him?" She spat, still reeling from the revelation that Vader was her father. "After everything he's done?" Luke pleaded with her. "He saved me, Leia. He saved all of us. After slaughtering millions? After destroying Alderaan?" She shot back. "The Alliance will never accept him. I will never accept him." The truth was, neither would the galaxy. The rebel leadership, Mon Mothma, Admiral Akbar, and General Madine, debated fiercely on what to do. Some wanted to imprison him, others to execute him for war crimes. Anakin understood. He had no illusions about his past, but Luke refused to let him be taken. There was one place where his father, Anakin Skywalker, would be safe. With Lando's help, he smuggled Anakin aboard the shuttle they had used to escape the Death Star and set a course for Mustafar. The battered Lambda-class shuttle broke through the thick, stormy clouds over Mustafar. Anakin Skywalker, the fallen Jedi, the redeemed Sith, sat in silence, staring at the molten rivers below. Beside him, Luke Skywalker piloted the craft with careful precision. The Executor was gone. The Empire was crumbling. The war was over. But for Anakin, a new war had just begun. The battle for his own soul. "I don't know if this is a good idea," Anakin admitted, his voice rasping through the damaged vocoder of his failing suit. The cybernetic casing that had been his prison for decades was now heavily damaged. He could feel his burned skin exposed in places. His breath labored. Luke, ever the optimist, gave him a reassuring glance. "We have no choice. The Alliance won't accept you, not yet, but I can help you heal here." With a soft thud, the shuttle's landing gear met the blackened rock. As the boarding ramp lowered, a wave of blistering heat greeted them. It was as if Mustafar itself recognized the return of its fallen son. Anakin felt its pull, the memories rushing back. Pain, betrayal, anger, loss. "Let's get to work," Luke said. Fortress Vader still stood, abandoned after the Empire's collapse, yet the automated systems remained intact. Luke carried Anakin inside, placing him on a medical table. Droids activated, scanning the former Sith Lord's failing body. A medical droid beeped. "Patient is in critical condition. Immediate cybernetic reconstruction required." Luke watched as his father struggled to breathe. He gripped Anakin's hand. "You're going to live, Father. I won't lose you again." Anakin was carefully submerged into a bacta tank, his scarred and burned body floating weightlessly in the healing liquid. Tubes and monitors surrounded him, tracking his vitals as the regenerative properties of the bacta worked to restore what remained of his ravaged flesh. Luke stood outside the tank, watching as the droids began crafting a new suit, one that would not be a prison, but a second chance. Days passed. The droids worked tirelessly, rebuilding Anakin's ruined body. But this was no longer the armor of Darth Vader. This was something new. Lighter, less restrictive, allowing him to move freely without the crushing weight of the Sith. His new suit was crafted from frick alloy, flexible yet durable, designed to enhance rather than enslave. The life support system was advanced, smaller, less suffocating. The helmet retained the breath modulators, but gone was the menacing visage of Vader. In its place stood a smoother, more refined mask, one that honored both his Jedi past and his warrior nature. When the final piece was placed, Anakin took his first independent breath in decades. He stood, looking down at his new hands, still artificial, but no longer bound in shadow. Anakin gazed at his reflection in the dark glass of the fortress. He no longer saw Vader. He saw the Jedi he once was. Luke watched him carefully. "How do you feel?" Anakin clenched his fist experimentally. "Lighter." He turned to his son. "But the weight of my sins is still here." Luke nodded. "Then let's do something about that." Father and son stood on the balcony of Fortress Vader, looking over the molten rivers of Mustafar. "What now?" Anakin asked. Luke smiled. "We find a new purpose. Together." That night, as Anakin stood in the dimly lit halls of Fortress Vader, the Force stirred around him and the air grew still. He was no longer alone. From the shadows, the Force ghost of Obi-Wan Kenobi emerged. But this wasn't the calm, wise master from Luke's visions. This was Obi-Wan as Anakin had last seen him, his Jedi robes burned at the edges, his face lined with sorrow and failure. "Anakin," Obi-Wan's voice echoed as if carried by the winds of time. "You returned here. Why?" Anakin rose to his feet, his fists clenched. "Because I have nowhere else to go. Because I am not wanted." Obi-Wan stepped closer, his expression unreadable. "And do you expect me to absolve you?" Anakin lowered his head. "No, I don't deserve it." Obi-Wan stepped closer. "Then why did the Force let you live?" Anakin clenched his fists, maybe as punishment. Obi-Wan sighed. "Or redemption." Silence. Anakin's voice faltered. "Padme, do you think she would forgive me?" Obi-Wan's expression softened. "She already did." And just like that, he was gone, leaving Anakin staring into the darkness, his past still haunting him, but hope flickering at the edges. A second figure stepped forward, bathed in a serene blue glow. Qui-Gon Jinn. "Anakin." Qui-Gon's voice was deep and steady, carrying the weight of wisdom beyond life itself. "It is not about deserving, it is about becoming." Anakin fell to his knees. "What am I supposed to be?" Qui-Gon placed a hand on Anakin's chest, over the one part of him that was still flesh. "The Force does not seek vengeance, it seeks balance." The moment stretched, time itself bending. Anakin felt warmth, not from fire, but from something greater. And then, just as suddenly, Qui-Gon was gone. Anakin opened his eyes, breathless. He had not been punished. He had been guided. Days passed. The new armor fit well. The air felt lighter. But one final trial awaited. Luke had contacted Leia and the rebellion. The response had been expected: anger, disbelief, and distrust. But Leia, though still conflicted, had agreed to send a small delegation. The meeting was held on the outskirts of a hidden rebel outpost. As the ramp of a transport lowered, Leia Organa stepped forward, flanked by Admiral Akbar, Mon Mothma, and General Riken. A squad of soldiers stood at the ready, their hands on their blasters. And there, standing before them, was Anakin Skywalker, no longer the towering menace of Darth Vader, but a man, still armored, still scarred, but undeniably changed. Leia's eyes burned with emotion. "Why should we believe anything you say?" Anakin took a slow breath, and for the first time in decades, he did something unexpected. He knelt. "I do not ask for forgiveness," he said. "I do not deserve it. I only ask for a chance to do what is right." Silence hung in the air. The rebel leaders exchanged uncertain glances. But then, Leia spoke, her voice softer now. "If you stand against the darkness now, then prove it." Anakin looked up, determination in his gaze. "I will." Anakin remained a shadow at first, an unnamed warrior aiding the rebellion from the fringes. His past crimes were not forgotten, nor were they ignored, but slowly, through action, he began to prove that the man he once was, the Jedi, the Protector, still existed within him. On the edge of the galaxy, Luke's Jedi Academy was in its infancy. Anakin had chosen not to join, knowing that his presence would only cast a shadow over the next generation. Instead, he traveled to war-torn systems, using his knowledge of the Empire to dismantle its remnants piece by piece. Months later, the galaxy was in chaos. Without the Emperor, the remnants of the Empire were fracturing. Some warlords tried to seize power, while others fell into infighting. But one, Grand Admiral Thrawn, had a vision. He saw the Empire's potential beyond Palpatine's rule. A tactical genius, Thrawn had always known that Palpatine's rule was flawed, relying too much on fear, too little on strategy. Now, with Coruscant in chaos and the New Republic rising, Thrawn saw his opportunity. But then came the impossible news. Darth Vader was alive, not as the Emperor's enforcer, but as a traitor fighting alongside the rebellion. Thrawn didn't believe in Sith mysticism, but he respected Vader. The Dark Lord had been an unstoppable force of nature. But this was a problem. Anakin Skywalker, freed from his former self, was more dangerous than ever. Thrawn could not allow him to inspire the broken Empire's remnants. He had to eliminate Skywalker permanently. Then, the attacks began. Entire New Republic fleets vanished. Key supply lines were cut with terrifying precision. Former Imperial officers who had sworn loyalty to the Republic were assassinated. Only one mind in the galaxy was capable of such brilliance: Thrawn. When the Grand Admiral finally revealed himself, it was with an offer. "Surrender, General Skywalker, and I will spare your son. Continue to resist, and I will erase every trace of your bloodline." Anakin, standing aboard a Republic command ship, clenched his fist. He had once been a warrior who fought with anger, with hate. But now, as he gazed at the vastness of space, he felt something else. A clarity he had not known since before Mustafar. "Thrawn, you underestimate me." Again. And so, the war began. Thrawn's fleet struck Coruscant first. It was a masterstroke of strategy. While the New Republic expected to fight warlords in the Outer Rim, Thrawn took the core by surprise. The Republic's forces scrambled. Leia, now a senator, worked desperately to rally defenses, but Thrawn's tactics were too precise. It was Anakin who saw the flaw. Thrawn had studied Vader, but he didn't quite understand Skywalker. Anakin led a daring assault with an elite strike team, including Lando, Chewbacca, and a reluctant Han Solo, deep into the heart of Thrawn's command vessel. Luke, leading a small squad of Jedi, fought through Thrawn's bodyguards, but Thrawn was ready. Inside his throne room, Anakin confronted the Grand Admiral. "You've lost," Anakin said, lightsaber in hand. Thrawn, ever calm, merely smiled. "Have I?" At that moment, explosions rocked the New Republic Command Center. A final gambit. Thrawn had foreseen his own loss and set in motion a devastating final strike, but Anakin knew Thrawn's mind. As the ship shook, the former Sith leaped forward, his blade clashing against Thrawn's honor guards. Thrawn, calculating as ever, pulled a blaster, only for a white blade to cut it from his hand. "You were always too predictable, Grand Admiral," Anakin muttered. Thrawn simply smiled. "And yet, Skywalker, I was never trying to win." Anakin's eyes narrowed, then widened. The Chimera was set to self-destruct. Luke rushed in. "Father, we have to go." Anakin looked at Thrawn. The Grand Admiral stood tall, proud, ready to go down with his ship. "I will see you in the unknown regions, General Skywalker," Thrawn said cryptically. Anakin hesitated only a moment, then turned and fled with his son. As their ship escaped, the Chimera detonated, vanishing into fire and debris. Thrawn was gone, or so they thought. The New Republic stood victorious. The last great Imperial strategist was defeated. And yet, as Anakin stood beside his son, watching the galaxy begin to heal, he couldn't shake a feeling. Thrawn had planned for everything. Deep in the unknown regions, in the farthest reaches of space, a single Imperial shuttle slipped into darkness. A voice crackled over the comms. "We have arrived, Grand Admiral. The contingency awaits." Thrawn sat back, his red eyes gleaming. The war is far from over. The galaxy thought it had seen the last of Grand Admiral Thrawn. The Battle of Coruscant was won, and his flagship, the Chimera, had been destroyed. But Anakin Skywalker knew better. He had fought against brilliant tacticians, ruthless Sith lords, and the might of the Empire itself. Yet none had unsettled him like Thrawn, because Thrawn never fought battles he couldn't win. So why had he let them defeat him? That question haunted Anakin. And when New Republic scouts began disappearing near the unknown regions, he knew Thrawn had not been defeated. Thrawn was waiting. And so, Anakin Skywalker prepared for one final journey. One last war. Luke Skywalker had become a Jedi Master. His new Jedi Academy on Ossus was flourishing, training a new generation of peacekeepers. But when his father came to him with a request, Luke hesitated. "You want me to follow you into the unknown regions?" Anakin nodded. "Thrawn isn't gone, Luke. I can feel it. He's planning something. We need to stop him before it's too late." Leia disagreed. "We barely held the Republic together after the last war. If we lose you both, who will lead the Jedi?" But Anakin's mind was made up. And, despite his doubts, Luke couldn't ignore the Force whispering to him. They gathered their allies: Mara Jade, Ezra Bridger, Ahsoka Tano, Hera Syndulla, and Captain Rex, the old clone who refused to let his general go into battle alone. Together, they boarded the Ghost and vanished into the dark. The unknown regions were a graveyard of lost ships and forgotten worlds, but in the depths of uncharted space, Anakin's worst fears were confirmed. Thrawn had built something, a hidden empire, A fleet larger than anything the Republic had seen since the Clone Wars, forged in secret beyond the galactic rim. The First Order, powered by ancient technology and warriors unlike anything they had faced before. Thrawn was not just rebuilding the Empire, he was evolving it, and at its heart was something far worse. Deep within the shadows of the unknown regions, a power was stirring. Something old, something Sith. And it knew Anakin Skywalker. Anakin and his team infiltrated Thrawn's capital, Exegol, a world built on the ruins of Sith temples. But Thrawn was waiting. "You were always destined to return here, Skywalker," Thrawn said. "The Sith knew this long before I did." And then the trap was sprung. Ancient Sith alchemy, once used to resurrect the dead, had found its perfect subject. A figure emerged from the shadows, a twisted reflection of Anakin himself. Darth Vader, not a ghost, not a memory, a living, breathing nightmare. Cloned secretly by Darth Sidious, fueled by the dark side, controlled by forces even Thrawn did not fully understand. "You let me die once," the clone said, igniting a crimson blade. "This time, I kill you." Anakin had fought many battles, but never against himself. This thing before him, this artificial Vader, was everything he had once been. Powerful and ruthless without mercy. But Anakin was no longer that man. As their lightsabers clashed, Anakin fought not with anger, not with hate, but with clarity. Every move Vader made was one he himself had once used. And so, he countered with something Vader had never understood. Peace, compassion. The will to fight not for himself, but for others. And in the end, it was not anger or hatred that defeated Vader. It was acceptance. Anakin deactivated his blade. "You are nothing but a shadow," he said. "And shadows fade." Vader lunged, only for Luke's blade to pierce his chest. The clone gasped, staring at them both. Then, with a final whispering breath, Darth Vader was no more. As the battle raged outside, Thrawn watched from his command throne. Even in defeat, he did not flinch. "You have won this battle," he admitted, "but the war is far from over." Anakin faced him. "It ends now." Thrawn gave a slight smile. "Are you so certain?" The Grand Admiral reached for a concealed switch, one last contingency. But he never got the chance. Mara Jade fired, a single blaster shot. Thrawn's expression never changed. He merely exhaled, closed his eyes, and collapsed. With their leader gone, the First Order fell into chaos. Their fleet, without Thrawn's genius, crumbled. Anakin, Luke, and their allies escaped as Exegol burned. The last remnant of the Empire was dead. Years had passed. The scars of war faded, and peace settled over the galaxy. On Tatooine's golden sands, Anakin Skywalker sat in quiet reflection, watching the twin suns set. A warm breeze carried the whispers of a distant past. Beside him stood his son, Luke Skywalker, now a Jedi Master. His wife, Mara Jade, rested a hand on his shoulder, while their son, Ben, played in the sand. Nearby, Leia Organa and Han Solo stood, their son Ben Solo watching the suns with curiosity. Anakin exhaled deeply. "I never thought I'd see peace in my lifetime," he murmured. Luke smiled. "You made it possible." Anakin's lips curled into a contented smile. "Then perhaps I am free." As the sun set, Anakin closed his eyes, breathing out softly. Peaceful, serene, final. The Force embraced him, and a shimmer of light flickered around him, joining those who waited in the luminous beyond. Obi-Wan Kenobi, Yoda, Qui-Gon Jinn. They stood in the glow, their eyes full of pride and understanding. At last, Anakin Skywalker was home.